Great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, I have Bart van Loon. Did I say that correctly?
Actually, it was surprisingly well. The Bart would be the English pronunciation and Van Loon the Dutch pronunciation.
Okay, so how would you say it? Let's start there.
Yeah, well, completely in Dutch, my name would be pronounced Bart van Loon. In English, Bart van Loon, obviously. So, yeah.
Right. Well, let's keep to the Dutch version. I'm in the Netherlands and you're in Belgium.
Exactly.
So, and Bart, let's start with, what does your anywhere office look like? And I warned you that we were going to be talking about this, so you know what I'm looking for. But I am really curious because everybody's got such a different setup and different needs when they work from anywhere. And I know you travel a lot, so maybe there's something there. But what does your anywhere office look like?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is obviously my laptop. One thing that is really important is to have a great battery life on your laptop. So that's definitely important to me. I find it particularly hard to work without the internet. So I can go for a stretch without being online, but usually like it would be less than an hour. So good internet connection is important as well. My phone, obviously, a decent smartphone. Again, with a good reception is important. You should not be afraid, let's say, to go online to roam as well. So you need to have a decent setup there with your mobile operator, so you can freely use your phone anywhere you like without being afraid of these horrible charges that are possible, unfortunately.
Right.
So that's basically it in terms of hardware. I do like to write things on paper, so I tend to have a paper and pen available around. But well, that would really be less necessary than the laptop and the telephone and the internet.
I have that too. In fact, I have my paper here where I don't know what it is about. I could type it out, but I just like writing it out for some reason.
Me too. So. Yeah. I really do. It's just that always afterwards, I really have to immediately digitize it. Otherwise, one way or another, it will get lost, unfortunately. So it is kind of a waste of time, perhaps, to write it down first and then to digitize it. But then again, you could also use that to reorder your thoughts and maybe make a more decent summary of the meeting you just had. But yeah, if there's no pen or paper, then it's just fine as well.
Right. And I see that you're an IT offshore staffing specialist, it says on your LinkedIn profile. So I've recently learned the difference between offshoring and nearshoring, but if you could go into a little bit about what that means. What is an offshore staffing specialist and what do you do?
Yeah, because I need to correct it a little bit. I definitely am an offshore staffing specialist, but not necessarily in IT. So it goes much broader across different sectors. It's not necessarily IT. Then again, obviously, IT is one of the sectors where offshoring is the most prominent. Due to various factors, obviously.
And who else is doing offshoring? Because actually, you're right, I don't hear about it in other sectors very often. I mean, remote working tends to be, it's just like Agile. It started with the software community because it lends itself to that kind of work, but now it's going broader.
Yeah, it's true. Well, remote working remotely is kind of linked with IT often, but even if you look at, for example, the garments industry, they've been going offshore for decades already. All of the clothes are being produced offshore in offshore regions. So it's definitely also remote working in a way. It's of course different because it's not like every individual would be working locally in that factory, but as a whole, if you look at it from the context of the company, it is an offshore office that they're operating, right?
Right.
But yeah, no, if I would talk about my own company, we set up offshore relationships, definitely in IT. As I said, it's the most obvious sector to work in. But also if you look at graphical design, there's possibilities, accountancy, engineering, obviously, data entry, even virtual assistants are there. So there's really much more that can be done from over distance than only IT.
And why are people doing this? Why are people, I mean, I'm going to assume the number one thing is going to be cost. People are going offshore because of cost, but I think there's more.
Yeah.
Is there?
There's definitely much more. We find that that costs is perhaps not even on the first, the first element on the list of reasons why people will go offshore. Well, let's say it's a shared first place with availability. We find that today more and more people are going offshore, not because they want to organize things cheaper, but because they want to organize things better. And with better, I mean with better people. I really think it's very important today to have the ambition. Let's say I have a company in Antwerp. You should not have the ambition to hire the best software developer of Antwerp or even the best software developer of Flanders. You should hire or look for the best software developer in the world.
Right.
And obviously we're not there yet. I mean, nobody can offer you a truly global source pool of talent. But if you go offshore to certain locations, you can definitely raise the hiring bar because simply you have many more candidates and many more people around.
Right. Is there a particular location that's really popular to go offshore?
Yeah, of course. There's locations like the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh is there because they're pretty good at English. Because of colonization, they have the English economic structure, the English education system, the English political system. So it really lowers the barriers of working together with them. But I found that in Europe, if you look more at the Latin Europe, if I may call it that way, so France and Spain and Portugal, they tend to go more to Africa, specifically Northern Africa. Yeah, because people speak French there, right?
Of course.
Yeah. Or even Latin America, because language, it's just a really big thing in working with people locally or remotely.
Right.
So it's really all over the world, you can say. Eastern Europe is there as well. As you said before, it would be called nearshoring then, offshoring, nearshoring. Really, there is not such a big difference, I would say.
Where does the line get drawn? I mean, is there a time zone where it's like if it's over 4 hours away, then it's offshoring or?
Yeah. No, not really, because Pakistan, nobody would call it nearshoring, but it's only 3-hour difference with Europe. So I don't think it's a time difference. Generally, it depends, of course, where you are from. I don't think in the United States anything would be called nearshoring because distances are always great.
Right.
But in Europe, it tends to be Eastern Europe would be nearshoring, and anything else would be offshoring.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it brings up then the issue of culture in working together. And surprisingly, and most of the time when I ask people about culture and how do you deal with different cultures, most people say actually it's not an issue. And I'm totally surprised to hear that because I mean, from being an American living in the Netherlands, I also thought, oh, Western Europe, it's just like the US, very similar, and it's totally not. I mean, on the outset, but when you're in it, you realize, oh, there's a million things that are different.
Yeah.
So I'm always surprised. There are big differences, but it doesn't seem to be an issue.
Yeah.
Or what's your experience with it?
Yeah. My experience is that there's a very clear distinction to be made between professional culture and personal culture. My specialties lie with setting up relationships between European employers and Pakistani and Sri Lankan employees. And there you can clearly say that from a personal perspective, the cultures are vastly different. People lead their life in a different way, like the important moments in one's life, they are different, very different in southern India. Or the subcontinent, I mean, or in Europe. But then there's also the professional culture, and there we talk about loyalty to the employer, to the project. Talk about the interpretation of this term called deadline.
Right.
It's about working together or not, and their differences really tend to be much smaller, especially I would argue in regions that were colonized by Europe. It's one of those results that unintentionally came from the colonization.
Right.
So even though there might be differences personally, professionally, it's not really an issue often.
People kind of realize that, hey, we're working with I mean, maybe the awareness is just so there when you start working with somebody else that it's kind of a heightened awareness maybe.
Yeah, that is important, because I would be the last one to say that there is no differences at all. No, there's a difference in language, difference in time, difference in culture. So these things have to be accounted for, and preferably before you start. Because I do think this is one of the most underestimated points in going offshore, is that you should, before you start, you should think about how to deal with these differences, instead of after coming across some problematic differences, maybe retrofitting the way that you work together. So it's really something that you should consider before.
And I assume you have a process for those considerations maybe before, when a client comes to you and says, I need a team of, how does that work? Does a client come to you and ask for a team, or do they say, I have a project? How does that happen?
Yeah. Well, in our case, we are really just an HR partner. Well, not just an HR, but we are an HR partner. So we sit together with you to truly and deeply assess the kind of people that would optimally fit in your organization in its current situation.
Okay.
That would be the first step. Then we would go out in Southern Asia and find people, and we will pre-screen them for you. We're pretty strict on the English level, on the degree that people might have, because unlike in Europe, I would argue that in South Asia it is a good, let's say it is a good filter. It's an important filter still, the degree. So language degree, also some soft skills that we really try to estimate, like how would this person feel or deal with working in a European economic environment, which is of course different than elsewhere in the world. And after that, we would send 1, 2, maybe 3 candidates to the customer, who will do the final hiring using their knowledge of their sector.
Right.
Because we're not specialists in Java development, or specialists in graphical design, or specialists in accountancy. So screening somebody, recruiting somebody related to those skill sets, we rely on a customer itself. This is not project-based, never. It's always, we always set up permanent or semi-permanent relationships between people remote and employers locally.
Okay. So it's actually, they end up getting a job, like for a long, so it's not just, they're here for a project.
Yeah.
They end up, it's a long-term thing. Okay.
Exactly. We offer people then a full-time employment contract, but it's a customer who gets direct management and direct supervision over the resources.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I recently hired a number of people for the Happy Melly team, and I knew it was going to take a lot of time. And really, I was doing the pre-screening in essence for Jürgen, who would do the final decision, or he would take our input and make the final decision. But the amount of time that it took to really screen people properly and to get to know them was insane. So I can imagine that a client would be very grateful to have a service that did
Definitely,
that.
Yeah. As I said before, this is also an aspect which is important, and perhaps even more important than cost often, because we can offer black on white. We can guarantee that we find a good resource within 2 months. Opposed to that, for example, the IT sector, the numbers are currently that if you have a vacancy for an IT job at your company, you are to expect only 1.8 candidates within the first 4 months of your offer. Yeah, this is for Flanders, these numbers. So 1.8 candidates in 4 months. So it just takes a lot of time to find people who are good and affordable, because there's always freelancers, but yeah, the rates are extraordinary in IT.
Well, and also the dependability fluctuates wildly, I've heard. I mean, I've just heard so many people complain like, yeah, they were great in the beginning, and then 2 months later, we just didn't hear from them again, or, it was just gone, or...
Because today, if you're in everywhere in Europe, I would argue, if you're a freelancer and you're like pretty good in IT, you get offers daily. You can really be very picky and really set your price very high for any job that you would like.
Yeah, I've been, I keep track of all kinds of, I'm a tracker, I'm a quantified self nut, but I keep track of every time I get a client request for somebody coming to me saying they want work. And I got 10 requests just in January alone, which I thought, that was great. I mean, I've had much poorer days. So yeah, I mean, it was, it's extraordinary. It's a lot of...
It's really every other day. Yeah, you get a request or an offer these days. Yeah, it's true.
So now, what do you see people are really struggling with when they start to work remotely with these clients? I don't know how much insight you have into the actual working relationship, but I assume you have some.
Yeah.
So what do you see people struggling with? I mean, I hear all kinds of things, but from your perspective.
Yeah. One really, really important thing is control. If you look at the different tasks that any manager, also a remote manager, would be to brief somebody, to support them during the work, then to check or control the results, and then to give feedback back, right? And this is kind of the loop that every project manager finds himself in all the time when dealing with his or her team. And of those four parts, so the briefing, the supporting, the controlling, and the feedback loop, controlling really tends to be the most difficult one. It is kind of a trust aspect which has to be there. You have to start with a decent level of trusting each other, which then can go up or down depending on the working relationship. One thing, like, what people tend to do is they would err on the side of controlling too much. Like, we've had clients suggesting that why don't we put up a permanent camera on the room where a team is working, for example, or why wouldn't we constantly record the screen of all those guys so we can always see what they're working on, or all these types of control, which are really, really something that we always discourage to do. Or even, just not allow to be implemented, because in the long run, or even in the mid-long run, I would say, they always tend to give the bad results. People who are over-controlled, they tend to get over-dependent, for example.
Right.
It's perhaps something that you would see in many Western governments. That government employees, they're over-controlled, so they become over-dependent, over-compliant, and then efficiency goes down. Less room for creativity, less room for making errors, less room of thinking of different solutions yourself.
Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare to me. I'm just thinking, last night I slept horribly, and this morning I just was not effective. I can only imagine if somebody were to be recording my screen this morning, I probably would have been fired. I was just kind of doing nothing, and finally I had to go on a walk and a cup of coffee, and I came back and then I'm able to focus, and maybe tomorrow I do double time or something. But I can imagine any freelancer, any employee would go through this kind of thing, and it seems normal, and it should be allowed, I would think.
Yeah. No, of course. But it's also not about allowing, but it's about getting a feeling that most companies today, they allow Facebook and then YouTube and everything, but nobody then would allow you Facebooking 2 hours straight, right?
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't allow myself to.
No, I agree. But if you kind of walk around through the office and you glance at people's screen from time to time, not really checking or controlling, but just you get an idea of somebody when they're working or not, or they're productive or not, or they're maybe stuck on the same thing for a long time or not. And this is something that you lose with a remote team. Then again, what we offer to compensate this is we have, of course, a whole office in Pakistan and Sri Lanka. So even if you hire a single person with us, he would still be sitting in an office with many people there. So the social pressure, you can say, is there to work. We do record, obviously, when they enter the office, when they leave the office, when they go for lunch. So these are simple things that we record, which I think are rather basic and important, yeah. But controlling too much, over controlling stuff, yeah, that tends to be a mistake that people are making out of fear, because they lose a little bit this control.
And so what do you recommend instead? I mean, if you see somebody really controlling, how do you say, hey, relax, just trust? I mean, you can't just say relax and trust the process. I mean, they're like, hey, this is my money.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's where our job gets pretty hard, because it's very emotional. I mean, we're not dealing with tears and rage, whatever, but still, it's like a subjective emotional feeling that the customer has. This is really not something. It's not really you should not see it as a problem that you try to solve. It's really a problem that you should avoid. So that is something that we focus on very, very much. Before we set up any relationship, the people offshore obviously are trained, but also the people locally are trained. So all our customers and a set of their employees are obliged to go through a Zeropoint training in remote team management, virtual team management, cultural awareness, for example. We also offer the possibility and strongly suggest our customers to take that possibility to bring over their remote team to Belgium, to Europe, like 3 weeks a year, for example. We urge them to connect on LinkedIn, on Facebook, in chatting. We urge them to send each other congratulations cards for birthdays or births or whatever happens in their personal life as well. So you really get a sense of belonging. You get a sense of like, it really becomes a team, right?
Right.
And then we tend to avoid these feelings of powerlessness and loss of control.
So I'm kind of a nut, because I'm unusual in that, in my experience, I don't have to meet the people in order to work well with them. But I've been working remotely for so long and been doing this for so many years. But I'm being convinced by almost people that I interview that you have to meet face to face. That is just so important, that it just builds the connection. And at first I was arguing it, but I'm starting to say, like, well, actually, these people have a point. Do you see that there's such a huge difference when people meet face to face?
I'm not really sure if the face-to-face meeting is important as such. What really is important is that for a long-term professional relationship, that you also engage at least a little bit into getting a personal relationship, especially when going offshore. And then the next step is that I would argue is that a face-to-face meeting really helps in getting like this personal rapport between different people, between two people. But then, if you hire a team of 7 people offshore, there's no real need of getting all 7 of them shipped over to Belgium for a couple of weeks. Then maybe just with the team lead or something, or the project manager would be enough. So yeah, face to face, I would say it's important. It's a really good medium of setting up trust, but the trust really is the important thing, not the face-to-face meeting as such.
And it sounds like there's a lot of other personal things people can do. I mean, the connecting on social media seems like an obvious one, but I really like the, sending the birthday card and remembering people's birthdays.
Playing games together online,
yeah.
But there's so many companies today that have a PlayStation or Nintendo Wii or something set up where the employees, they get to play together for, I don't know, or they have this Mario Kart competition throughout the company, something. And those are things that are so easy to join remotely today, and you should definitely set that up. It's possible, it's easy even, I would say.
Yeah, the technology exists. It's more about the processes, which brings me to my next favorite topic, which is tools and processes. And it sounds like from when we were talking before that you guys know a lot about this. So,
well, yeah. Yeah. So,
Is there a particular set of tools that you always recommend? Or does it depend on the client that you're working with?
yeah.
How do you go about that?
Yeah. It definitely depends on the client or on the specific setup. But then you might be surprised that the generic set of tools is pretty similar for any kind of setup out there. One thing is, so if you look at tools, most of them will be about communication.
Right.
So if I would just list, without naming specific tools, a couple of important ones is definitely there is voice communication. It's not recommended. It just has to be there. You have to have a good and easy to use voice communication between you and the remote employees.
So whether you're using a phone, Skype,
Yeah.
whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. In offshore, it will most probably be VoIP. And so Skype is one example, but also there's also hard phones, obviously, which allow you to call remotely for free over VoIP. We go even a step further, and every employee at Zeropoint, which is then virtually employed by our customers, every single employee gets a Belgian phone number. So it's really easy for all our customers to just pick up their phone in their car while they're jogging early in the morning, whatever, call this Belgian phone number, and they reach their developer directly at their desk at the remote destination without paying extra, just paying for a local call.
Right.
So that's really a very, very important one. People are asking about video communication. I think that's an important one too, but definitely less important than voice. What we tend to realize is that what is even more important than video communication is screen sharing. So that would be my second point.
Okay.
Now, for example, if you imagine two developers working together on something or meeting on something and discussing something, you would most often see them when they're together locally, physically. You will most often see them sitting together next to each other, facing the same screen, as opposed to sitting across each other and looking at each other's face. So if you translate that into remote dealing, screen sharing is more important, I would argue, than this video conferencing. I mean, I'm not saying video conferencing is not important, but I want to downplay it a little bit. You don't have to see each other through webcams or video every day, whereas calling and hear each other daily definitely is recommended.
And there's now plenty of tools that allow screen sharing and video at the same time, which seems totally ideal then. Depending on the situation, of course.
Yeah. There's Skype, there's TeamViewer, but there's also any VNC setup would also work. So yeah, there's many options there, many options.
Okay.
Third would be chat. It's even, I would say, an advantage. I find it strange that companies working only locally, have only, it seems to be recently, found out the benefits of chatting with their employees internally in the same building. If you want to share documents, just quick transfer of a document through chat, that's possible, file transfers, passwords, email addresses, anything that is more easily copy-pasted than spelled over the phone should really be there on chat. What I also really like about chat is that if you look at voice on one hand and email, which is then the next tool, on the other end, email really is asynchronous, voice is synchronous, and the chat sits somewhere in between, right?
Right.
When you're in a live chat session, it's definitely synchronous, but it's also very easy to quickly ask a question on chat and just getting an answer an hour later or something. That works easily. I mean, that works just fine as well. So email is there, chat is there, voice is there, and then one important thing to realize is that you should use the right tool for the right job.
And I assume you help guide the clients for given this, you're probably going to need a chat and definitely a voice. And
Definitely,
okay.
yeah. We have some common situations laid out where we give examples on the tools usage. Like I said, this is part of the training that we give all our customers initially before they start working remotely with people. And this is also followed up even monthly in the first few months. Monthly, we follow up the tools usage of our clients.
Smart.
Yeah.
Super smart. It kind of gives like a little refresher every month or a review or how's it going or is it working for you? I mean, I can imagine maybe it's the perfect tool, but it doesn't work for them for whatever reason.
Exactly, yeah. And it's a habit. it really is a habit, which has to be, inhabited. If that is
Right.
the word, yeah.
Right. No, I can absolutely see that. I think that's really smart, actually. And what I really like about the system, and I didn't think about it before, is that you're giving people a Belgium number, and it just makes that one step more seamless
Yeah.
than if they. There was also I did this also with my grandmother. I bought a U.S. number for her because she was in the U.S. and she was just somehow intimidated to dial the international number, even though, it's just a couple. So I just thought, I'll get you a US number. And then it rings through to my Skype. And then she was able to call and, it was like no problem at all. She was used to it.
Yeah. No, definitely. I also find it kind of strange, even though I do feel it myself. If I get a call from an unknown number, if it will be a local number or a foreign number, it does give this different feeling.
Right.
I guess it's really because of maybe my parents or everybody's parents always saying, like, don't stay on the phone too long because it costs so much. And then a remote call or like, that would be even more expensive. And then it would be a little bit wary of calling, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's where it comes from. But I don't.
Yeah, I had the same every day. No, you can't talk too long or don't call the long distance number. And of course now it doesn't matter anymore, but it's still. But there's also, I think there's more to it than that. There's a seamlessness that you're providing that I think with the remote working, I mean, there's so much distance in so many ways that any way that you can to sort of bridge that gap seems important. And it's never the big stuff. It's always the little stuff, like a Belgium phone number and the right tool.
Yeah. We also urge our customers to give their remote employees an email address with their own domain. So they don't have to email somebody at Zeropoint.it, which of course is perfectly all right, but they can email somebody with an email address within their own company on their own domain.
Smart.
It's also another important thing. Yeah.
Right. Smart. All these things to sort of bridge the distance and make people feel a little bit more normal.
Yeah, it's also definitely very important for a remote employee to have an account on the local time registration system, for example. They should not be using different reporting sets or different reporting routes or whatever. That just is bad. One thing I tend to tell my customers is that, they are sitting as far from you as you are sitting from them.
Oh.
Right? So it's not only hard for you or strange for you or unusual for you, it's also hard and strange and unusual for the people sitting offshore. And it's definitely, it's even quite easy to bridge, but you have to bridge it. You have to take effort there.
Right. And is there any difficulty with the time zone? I mean, it seems like such a simple thing. I mean, it's always, it's just add 2 hours or whatever, but it seems like time zone is so hard somehow.
Yeah. That we realize that in the beginning, people are sometimes confused, or it's a little bit harder, but really after a week or 2 weeks working with the same people remotely, it's also pretty seamless. I mean, like I really know that, like I feel this, like it's 10 a.m. in Belgium, and I know my guys in Pakistan, they will be having lunch. I don't have to consciously add this 3 hours. It's just 10 a.m. is lunchtime there, but so it tends to get really easy, and you, after a while, it's not a problem at all anymore.
So it's hard in the beginning, and then you
yeah. But what we do in our remote offices, we obviously have clocks with the Belgian time up against the wall.
Smart.
Yeah.
Smart. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So we've got a lot. One thing that I want to ask, you mentioned in the very beginning about personality and the soft skills that you look for. And I'm curious about, I mean, Are there certain personality traits that you find that don't work well with this situation? I mean, is there a type of person that just shouldn't work remotely?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the short answer is yes. Of course, it's something that can be learned, and then you could argue that anybody can learn it. But some people just, yeah, for some people, it's just easier to flow into this remote working situation than for others. In terms of personality, what we do with Zeropoint is everybody we interview gets to do a personality test and a tasks preferences test as well. So we look at experience, we look at technical background, personality, and task preferences. So these four, they form up the profile of a person.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what kind of task preferences would be like a red flag for you to be like, this person, this isn't going to work? I mean, I'm sure it differs in every situation, but I don't know if there's something general.
Yeah. Well, with the task preferences, it's not so much about can he work offshore or not. It's really more, is he a fit for this specific job or not?
Right.
Some jobs require you to be more leaning towards developing stuff, and others more towards the reporting stuff. Some require you to be very innovative and creative, and others require you to be able to follow rules and structures and just become much faster at the same thing after a while. So it's not so much about being able to work offshore or not, but more about, is this person specific match? Because in the end, we're a recruitment agency, right? So we look for the perfect match for your job.
Right.
If you look at personality, however, then there are some red flags.
Oh, can you tell me what some of those are? I would love to know what you look for.
For example, over dependability. Like if you're really dependent on quick and frequent feedback. If you're, you have to be able to work autonomously more than local employees.
Right.
That's maybe not a personality aspect, but communication has to come natural to you. It should not be a barrier for you to talk to somebody that you don't really know that well, often even in a different language. So that's also something. So it's important that you are, I would say, person-oriented. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I have read, of course, a lot about it. And people tend to be either task-oriented or people-oriented. And in a remote working relationship, people orientation is really, really, really important.
Right. I noticed that too when I was interviewing people for Happy Melly. You just get a sense for, oh, this person is going to be reaching out. I mean, there's one person, and for immediately she was reaching out. In fact, on the first day, she offered to call every single facilitator that we had. And I thought, oh my God, I would never do that. Like I would hate to be on the phone like that. And she was just like, oh, do you want me to call him? No problem. She was serious. I love, you thought, okay, I get it. That's a person who's going to reach out enough.
Yeah, but that's important because you have to trust the other person to ask you questions when something is unclear, right?
Right.
For example, I mean, there's many reasons that somebody should report to you or take initiative there. Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely some personality traits which are more favorable than others.
Right. Of course, everything can be learned, and everybody has a shot. If you really want to do it, I would think you have a shot, of course, if you really want to do it. But yeah, there's some things about. But it's just interesting. I'm always interesting, like from an HR perspective, when you're interviewing people, like what are the red flags, the things that stand out. So I find that very interesting, and it's smart to do a personality test and a task-oriented test. It's really it's really wise.
Yeah, and we put a lot of emphasis on that. It's really a very, very important part of our recruitment process.
Yeah, and I like that because it sounds like you really do want the best match and to have those kind of things that stand out. I mean, if somebody needs a really free creative spirit, then it's one thing. And if they need somebody who's really, tuck, you're getting your tasks done, that's another thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you mentioned that because that really is a tagline we're using, the perfect person for the perfect job. Because it's something we have the luxury of being able to offer because in Pakistan and Sri Lanka, there's just so many people, such good education, and unfortunately a slow economy. So there is availability of talent, which is crazy. There's so many people there looking for a job, and we're amazingly talented, well educated, and really willing to work very, very hard. And for us, it's really simple. I mean, if I can share some numbers, if we put out a vacancy, like a job for one of our customers, depending on the sector, of course, we get between 40 and 60 applicants within 1 week. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then you can really you get quality through quantity. I would say it gets really easy finding that really perfect match for the job in question.
Right, in a statistics game as a client, that's really in your favor.
Yeah, definitely, most definitely. Yeah, that's also why we're reaching out to those regions as opposed to some of the more closer regions in Eastern Europe, because many of these countries in Eastern Europe they have even fewer employees, fewer inhabitants than even Flanders. So that means also fewer universities and fewer people available on the job market.
Right. Oh, I love it. Yeah, and then in terms of just pure statistics, your chances as a company, if you want to get some work done, you're going to find really a star for sure, especially if you know the people and you're getting them screened. I mean, love it. I love it. So then one last question, which is, if people want to learn more, or if they want your company to hire for the next big project, what's the best way of finding you guys and getting in touch with you?
Yeah. Well, we tend to be pretty easily findable online. I mean, zeropoint.it is our website. Okay. There's also zeropoint.be, of course, we're based in Belgium. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can even Google my name, which is Bart van Loon, Bart van Loon. And I'm really easy to find and contact online. So yeah, you're very welcome. By phone, we have a form on the website. You can email me, obviously. I'd be very happy to help you.
Great. Yeah, I assumed, given that you were offshoring, that finding you online wouldn't be an issue. But I always like to ask the question so that I know exactly what channel people can go through, and then I can put it in the show notes as well.
Of course, yeah. Well, Bart at zeropoint.it. That's my email address.
Great. Well, I really appreciate your time today. I learned some new things, and I'm looking forward to writing this up, and especially adding some of these quotes in the book. One of the things is, the problem is you want to avoid problems, not solve them, which that was a great quote. There's a few things, a few gems in there I can't wait to bring out.
Yeah. But it is important because it has all to do with trust, and trust is something you should retain and not something you should repair.
Yet another one. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, we'll end here. And thanks so much. And until next time, everybody, be powerful.
Our pleasure. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.